everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Bo and Joe Show. I'm Joe, of course, and I'm here with my co-host, Bo. And thanks for joining in. So how's your week been, Bo? We're back. We're back again. It seems like, we're a moment in time where we're back and together again. One of my favorite parts of the week. So how's your week going?
Good to see you, Joe. I agree. Time is flying really fast. The end of the Olympics, right? There's a little lull. Maybe we have a week or two, and then next thing you know, it's time for the NFL football. So, but let's talk about the end of the Olympics, which was absolutely incredible.
I agree.
And how it turned out.
Yeah, I think we had, some of my favorite sports. The women came out on top. We had the gold in the women's volleyball. We had the beach volleyball gold, and the USA women's basketball team came out with gold. And the men's. I mean, the men's, was kind of iffy there for a while. What did you think? And then there was some controversy about the players reached out. Did you see that? They were tweeting against the media who had doubted them, and yeah, they were pretty. I forgot the two players' names, but who are the players on there again? Durant.
Oh, you're talking about the NBA, the basketball players?
Yeah, the NBA, but they were on the Olympic team, and
yeah.
So,
again, talking about divas.
Well, we have to tell the viewers that before we came live, I told Bo that he's a diva. He's turning into a diva. His lighting was off, and we almost had to delay the show. I'm surprised we didn't need to wait for hair and makeup, Bo.
And my response to that comment was, I will fall on the sword and admit that defensive backs are twins to wide receivers, because the wide receivers are more known as divas than defensive backs. But right, and basically a defensive back, the old cliche is defensive backs are wannabe wide receivers but can't catch a ball. So, but when you talk about the NBA, as I wrote in my book, and I haven't gotten any flack on it yet, but I'm pretty sure it's coming. I wrote in my book that basketball players are passive aggressive and football players are aggressive. And so knowing basketball players like I do, I could see why they are unhappy with the media coverage of what the projections were that they were going to, how they were going to compete and come out, during the Olympics. So I expect them to not forget who made those comments. Football players tend to steer away from that because it's kind of a distraction. But basketball players, they kind of have it in them to, approach the media and face them.
Yeah, they call them right out, and I wish I meant to write it down, but they call them out. But we don't usually put up viewer comments this early, but I'm just compelled to put this one up.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I want to come up. Oh, my comment won't come up. Chris, you'll have to put up George's comment. For some reason, I can't put the comments up right now. So, Chris, are you there? Can you put up George's comment for me? After finding you last week, I had to come back for more. So we love that comment. So thank you, George. We're very glad that you are back, and we have Amy's back as well. So we'll start off the show with that note. That's perfect.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So what did you think about the rest of the Olympics? What about the young woman who, did you see that? The Belarusian sprinter who?
Yeah.
So I think
defected.
Yeah, she defected, and because her coaches were trying to force her to run a race that she wasn't prepared for, and then they tried to forcibly put her on a plane back home, and her grandmother tipped her off, and said, which I'm fearful of what happened to the grandmother. The grandmother tipped her off and said that that the news media in Belarus was saying that she was mentally ill and that she needed to be hospitalized when she returned. And she used Google Translator to communicate with the Japanese police, and that's how she was able to make her escape. I think that's an amazing story. We always have stories like that in the Olympics where somebody defects, but it's always it's a reminder of how, in my opinion, how fortunate we are to live in this country.
Absolutely, and it goes to show you how politics crosses and meets in the intersection of sports. And what's great about the Olympics, over time, if you look at history, a lot in terms of human rights have been accomplished in terms of bringing awareness to human rights, right? And so we think of John Carlos, Tommy Smith, but don't forget Peter Norman, who was the third person in the 1968 Olympics standing on the podium. Peter Norman from Australia didn't raise his fist, but he also had the patch, the human rights patch on his jacket supporting human rights. A lot of people don't notice that, right? Because he didn't raise his fist. But the bottom line is the Olympics has a purpose other than just competition. They have the ability to change or have a positive effect on someone's life. And if I'm not mistaken, you're right. Someone has defected before during the Olympics because their country, they feared for their life, or they feared for a family member or something. So we could look at that and say that is absolutely one of the positive outcomes during the Olympics. Folks having the ability to express themselves freely and then have a way to get out of a negative situation in their country. So if anything, those folks who are negative about the Olympics, they need to look a little deeper at the overall outcome of situations like that in terms of human rights.
I agree. And Chris, can you bring up Pamela's comment? And thank you for joining the show, Pamela. And I believe she's probably a fan of yours, Bo. I think it's probably your sister, correct?
Well, you read the book. More than likely, that is PJ. That is PJ, my sister. Who?
So, hi, PJ. I'm already a big fan of PJ right from the start, from the start of the book.
Yes, you are. She was the one that was very instrumental in getting me into Tierney, and she is a proud alumnus of Bethune-Cookman College, now Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach. So yes, that is PJ.
All right, so it might be the Joe and Pam show. You might be out.
Well, guess what? Well, remember, there is my oldest sister, Tina, then PJ, and then my brother, Joe Jr.
Oh, it could be Joe and Joe.
And then me, then my Irish twin, San, and then Alicia, the baby.
Wow, I didn't realize it was such a full house over there. And then down in Jacksonville.
Well, put it this way: Pam, Joe, myself, and San were raised, in my mom's house. The other two have different mothers. Papa was a Rolling Stone. So, but that, I'm not into half sister kind of thing. They're my sisters. So, yeah.
I love that. So I heard a great story. I'm hesitant about bringing it up, but since we're talking about the Olympics, because I didn't catch all of the details. I heard it actually as I was getting gas this afternoon, and I could hear it through the car, and I wanted to go back and look at it, but it was a story about, you may know it, about an American, I believe it was an African American sprinter way back in the day, and how an Australian sprinter was running behind him, and I don't believe he was the favorite to win. And he heard the Australian runner running, catching speed on him, and he heard him say out loud that, and I'm gonna get the quote wrong, but it was that N-word is not going to beat me. And he said, he thought to himself, this is one N-word that you will not catch. And he went on to win the gold. So I think that part of that is, certainly I can't even empathize with that. But I think, you want to speak about the abuse from the other athletes that the Olympians also has to face. There's so much stress and pressure in the Olympic Village and in the games, and really all of those things contribute. And I think that, that's something to be mindful of as well. I mean, you can certainly speak to that more so than I do. I don't want to carry the torch here, but I think that story was a great reminder of what the Olympians go through. I mean, in addition to the sanctuary story.
Well, remember, people in terms of the fan base only see what they see on TV. Or if we can go as far back as Jesse Owens, who competed during the German, what was that, World War I? I'm not a historian, but the Nazis, right? They were very dominant in the Olympics during that time, and Jesse Owens shocked the world and how he was able to compete and win. So imagine what he went through, being the first African American during that time to compete and win during that atmosphere. So yes, athletes can get motivated for a number of reasons. They can get motivated because of the fan base cheering them on, because that absolutely can have a positive effect. But they can also get motivated by negative comments or emotions or actions. And most folks have heard the stories. How did Michael Jordan stay dominant for so long? He motivated himself by creating fictitious negative comments about him from the competition, because he knew he was the best during his era. How did he stay motivated to continue to be the best during that time? He literally created negative comments or negative issues against the team he was competing against. And they were never true, but in his mind, he created them. That's what motivated him. So there's a number of ways folks can get motivated. But when you talk about race relations, which hits home for a lot of folks, and not just necessarily people of color, Black people, it could be someone. Can you imagine what Jim Thorpe, Native American, one of the greatest athletes that people don't mention nowadays? He actually probably, if you get some sports historians together and rank, athletes in every sport and come up with a top 5, I would be willing to put money that Jim Thorpe is in the top 6. Jim Thorpe was an amazing athlete, Native American from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, right? So can you imagine what he went through during the Olympics when he competed as a Native American? So, it's a learning process. We should look back on our history to learn, evolve, and grow and learn from the past. And it could teach us something. They're all teachable moments. Hopefully I didn't go on the tangent.
Well, I'm glad you did. That's why I brought it up. I wanted you to carry that torch there. And that also reminds me of that story that I sent you earlier today about the Barbie doll that that Mattel, I believe that every Olympics, in recent years, the Olympics, they come out with an Olympic Barbie collection. And this year they did have an Asian doll that was the skateboarder, but and I looked at it, and there was a slight Asian resemblance, but it wasn't a true depiction of the Asian culture, and they received a lot of backlash, and they did come out and apologize for it. But I think that especially with the Asian community so prevalent. I mean, we had Suni Kim, and the Chinese athletes were so dominant, and they were in Tokyo. It's really a misrepresentation, and I see the backlash. I think that people don't want their cultures watered down, and I'm not even certain what the thoughts or reasoning were behind that, but certainly that should have been caught way before the production of that collection, in my opinion.
And you know what? It's a penalty. I'll use football analogies. It's a penalty, but there's a chance to make it up, to do better, get it right the next time. So yeah, they'll face the backlash, and some might say well deserved. I didn't know about it until you educated me on it and sent me that information, right? So,
well, I was a big fan of Barbie growing up. You got the football stories covered. I'll cover the Barbie stories.
So, my thing is, hey, they made a mistake. They didn't live up to their mission to be the best toy maker or doll maker, but they get another shot at it. Get it right now, right? Let's step up and get it right, and see how they can do better. Let's do better.
And I think the interesting part of the story was the last Olympics, they did have an Asian doll that really received no complaints. And they said that they had an actual depiction that they felt was culturally representative of the Asian culture. So I found that interesting that you were able to do it 4 years ago, but you couldn't pull it off this time. So,
well, you know what?
Go ahead.
No, well, I'm sorry to cut you off. Well, based on what I'm hearing now, I'm sure someone, a young media person, is going to make it their mission to do the research, do some, investigating, and try to come up with what truly happened. How did they go from getting it right 4 years ago to not getting it right now? So probably a senior media person won't take that opportunity to do that research, but a young, aggressive, eager media person will, because you would be interested in that story, finding out the entire details, right? That would be something that would be interesting to you. So yeah, I would just, keep an eye out on it. Who's to say that a story in a month or 2 or 3, someone's going to be able to answer that question you have? Because if you have that question, a lot of people have that question.
And keep in mind that subject's going to come up very soon, because the Winter Olympics are just around the corner.
Right around the corner.
We typically have a little bit of a break, but obviously we had the year off with COVID, and the games were delayed. So we'll be right back here talking about the Winter Olympics, and we'll have to see. I assume that will be corrected before the release of the Winter collection.
Yeah.
So what else happened at the games? Did we cover everything before we transition to something else?
I think we should, you started off talking about it, but I am absolutely impressed because the women didn't disappoint. They carried the Olympics this year. All of the women carried the Olympics. If you think about the medals, the stories, the competition, the women showed up and showed out. And the guys are kind of, sitting in the third row, which they deserve, to sit in the third row. So let's give the women the accolades they deserve and the time they deserve, because they showed up and showed out. So it's all about the women. I'm okay with that.
I agree. Well, pretty soon we'll be going into the NFL and it'll be all about the men. So let's give the women the glory. I agree. I think that the women were polarizing. They were dynamic, and I don't even so far as think about it. We had wrestlers who were phenomenal. We had power lifters who were phenomenal, and we had some track and field individuals who just really carried that sport. So I agree. I think they were amazing.
Absolutely. Allison Felix being the all-time winning track and field athlete, surpassing Carl Lewis. And I saw an interview with him, and he's perfectly fine with it. He's known her for a long time. Like most athletes who are, superstars or emerging superstars, they can identify a young superstar. And so, when she was young, being in that circle, she had an opportunity to spend time with Carl Lewis. And so he's known her for a while. That's a great story. She had dinner with him. She spent a weekend at his grandmother's house when she was meeting some new trainers or something like that. So, stories like that are just great stories. Great stories. So she is well decorated. Yeah.
I agree. So let's bring up some comments. Chris, can you bring up Pamela's comment?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What's my big sis got to say? She,
Chris,
it's funny.
did you see that comment?
She told me, she didn't tell me she said she was gonna try to tune in, but it wasn't, you know what I mean? Oh, the women rock. Of course they do.
And then can you bring up George's comment next? Very true. Usually the women dominate the Winter Olympics and men dominate the summer. So it was awesome to see. And then bring up Brandon's comment, please. Hello, Queen Joe and Mr. Bono.
Brandon, how are you? Good to hear it. Good to see he's on tonight. Yeah, so I mean there were just so many great stories. The women's basketball team absolutely have, earned the right to say they're as equally as dominant as the men's basketball program, right? Because they've won 5 to 7 straight Olympic medals in terms of gold medals. So there's just so many great stories that came out of the Olympics. And again, the women dominated.
I agree. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see, and both men and women are competitive, but I wonder if that impacts and puts the USA team going into the Winter Olympics. I have to believe there's probably a friendly rivalry across many genres, male versus female, and even in their own individual sports. So I'd like to see how that transpires. I'd love to hear I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the Olympic Village and really hear what goes on. I'm sure there's camaraderie. I'm sure there's, fraternization. I'm sure they socialize, and maybe not so much this time because of COVID, but I think there's probably some pretty close relationships in the Olympic Village.
I know where you're trying to get to, so let me help you get there. Yes, there's some trash talking. Absolutely. Because they're competitors. I mean, they compete, right? And so they're competitive, right? So even though they're representing America, when they're together and they're looking around the room and they're seeing athletes who are at the top of their game, even if it's a different sport, respect is earned, right? Respect is earned. So once they get to a comfortable level of seeing each other a couple of times and meeting each other and learning their names and learning where they're from, it's on. Trash talk is on. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So that's part of the camaraderie of being a teammate. You get in to learn the type of music they like, the type of food they like. They also learning the type of music you like and the type of food and movies. That's relaxing time to them, is learning about each other, learning what they like, what was life like for them growing up, where they grew up. Those are the conversations that happen, right? And so that's building a relationship with their teammates. And then when they come back to the States, they've now added to their contact list in their phone, right? So
right.
now if they're flying to Houston and someone's from South Dakota and they're flying to Houston for some type of promotion, they now have a teammate in Houston they can send a text to saying, I'll be there in a couple of days for 2 days for a photo shoot for whatever, or commercial. Let's have dinner, or let's have lunch, or what's your schedule like? That's the ultimate experience that athletes acquire from each other and competing in the Olympics and then other sports.
Well, you got half of where I was getting at. The other half was I assume that there's some dating and some frisky business going on.
Well, yeah, let's keep it clean. So yeah, I'm pretty sure folks will, if they're single and they've competed and they've won a medal, and now they're now relaxing, right? Their guardrails have come down. The intense feeling of competition starts to wane down because it's almost over. Sure, they may have, noticed another athlete, in line getting food or coming off the bus, and they had a chance to meet each other. Sure, I'm sure that happens. So, hey, listen, Megan Rapinoe and her fiance or wife, I'm not sure because I don't follow it totally, but the basketball player, she's there rooting for. I mean, what are the chances of a couple having the chance to root for each other? One's a basketball player, one's a soccer player, and it's during a pandemic, so most family couldn't come, right? So it worked out, right? They're a couple. They're together. They play two different sports, so that at least they can root each other on, and that worked out. I'm sure that.
I think there are many stories like that, and Amy's telling us, Chris, bring that up. That it's Sue Bird, and that it's Megan's fiance. So I think that there are many love stories like that. So I think that that's where I was getting at. I think they're close. I think they're close in many respects. The Olympic athletes, particularly those in the same sport. The swimming community looks very close, and I'm sure gymnastics is as well. But it's a different. I don't know if they're in as close quarters, or they don't seem to be as. Well, I don't know. I don't want to speak, but I'm sure I don't know the relationship, but I think they're very close companions.
Well, as athletes, there's a family community, regardless of what sport. Simone Biles, her significant other is a NFL football player. So then there is another football player that's on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. His sister medaled in the hurdles. I guess it was the 100-meter hurdles. So all those emotions, positive emotions, adds to the stories of the Olympics and continue after. So yeah, it's all good. I'm telling you, sports is the reason.
I know.
People can build great relationships, and stories come out of those relationships. If it didn't do it, I wouldn't have wrote a book.
So, Chris, can you bring up Randy's question? Randy has a question for us about the Olympics. He's saying, in the Olympics, do we think that some people are more competitive than they should be? I think.
Let's ask him, does he mean competitive with each other as teammates or competitive against the competition to other countries? Because those are two questions, the way I'm thinking about it.
I think he commented earlier too, and I think he's speaking about in part in response to us saying that the other countries and the backlash and the abuse that they give one another in their trash talking. He's saying both. Randy's clarifying both. I think that's a hard call. I think competitive, there's a difference between being competitive and being, I'm going to let you weigh in. I want to, you go first. I'm going to weigh my words because I want to say it the way that I want it to be delivered.
Okay. I will say, I'll try to answer both questions. Yes, some athletes are so competitive and they're so focused on accomplishing their goal, they don't allow anything, any distractions, or even their teammates to brush them out of their lane. So sometimes you have to have a conversation with them and say, hey, tone it down a little bit, right? And then there are some folks who are so focused on the mission of the USA winning, competing, and maintaining that mantra of, the shining light on the hill, the best country on the planet. And so both those scenarios are true. There are definitely some athletes that kind of go overboard. I mean, let's take Charles Barkley again. I can talk about Charles because I've known him in my past, right? When Charles competed in the Olympics, he was a nut. People were afraid of him because Charles was focused on probably proving he deserved to be on the Olympics because he got cut by Bobby Knight, who was the head coach of Ohio State, right? So Charles was probably trying to prove, being on the dream team, that he deserved to be there. And his way of proving that was intimidating the competition. So Michael could do what he wanted to do, which was score points. Larry Bird could do what he could do, and all the other dream team guys, right? So the bully on the team was Charles Barkley. And some people might say he went overboard, but sometimes you got to have a guy on the team that's a bully to intimidate, because sports is also about intimidating the competition, scaring those who walk with their chest poked out and stuck out, thinking that they're the best. So yeah, to try to answer that question specifically, yes, there are players, competitors who can take it a little too high, but that's where the team comes in and says, hey, listen, we love your energy, we love what you're doing, let's tone it down, because if it goes too high, you can cause penalties, and that can hurt the team.
So I take it from a different perspective too. It very similar, but I think that you're right. I think that sometimes arrogance serves the purpose, and the intimidation factor is definitely a necessity in many cases, because of course, and I think that winners are competitive in the field of athletics. You wouldn't be an exemplary athlete if you weren't competitive. But for me, there's a difference between being competitive and being and denigrating others. And you can't, in my opinion, and I think that this is what Randy is speaking to in some regards. They try to raise themselves up by making others smaller, and really, I think that is unnecessary, and I think that is crossing the line, and then that's the way that I'm reading it, and I think that that's what he meant in some respects. So I think that I'm all for competition, as long as you're not making someone small and denigrate them or slandering them personally, because then that ties into the whole mental health factor that we've been speaking about the past few weeks. I mean, athletes are people too. If you want to call out their jump shot, that's one thing. But if you're speaking about them on a personal level, that's an entirely different. And Randy's clarifying, yes, that's what he's speaking about. And I thought that that's what he meant.
Well, let me follow up now that I know exactly what he was talking about. In terms of arrogance, confidence, right? Because those are two different receiving emotions and actions. That's where you have coaches. Coaches' jobs are to coach the athletes, regardless if they're pros or not, and teach them sportsmanship. That's where sportsmanship comes in. it's okay to compete like crazy on the field, on the court, on the ice, on the diamond, even on the slopes. But you don't take it overboard and make it personal. That's where sportsmanship comes in. And that's part of the foundation of sports, right? You got to have discipline. You have to have respect, not just for your teammates, but for your competitors and the sport that you play. Because you can shine a red light versus a bright light on it. The red light is bad. The bright white light is good, right? So yeah, that's where sportsmanship comes in. So that was a good question. So but that's where athletes have to police themselves. And then if they can't, that's when the coaches step in. Because every athlete at that point who is in the Olympics, they've been taught sportsmanship. It's not some new word to them, right? So they should know how to behave. Let's put it that they should know how to behave. If act like you've been there before, even if you haven't been there before, and then your parents or family members, I'm sure you've had somebody over the years teach you how to behave.
But I think that sportsmanship, and now that you bring this up, sportsmanship in some respects is a behavior, and you can fake that. I think it also involves morality and values. So you can't fake that, and so that's what happens. That's why we get the leaks sometimes. Your coach is telling you to be on your best behavior, but if your core values don't align with that, and you're just faking it, because that's part of that persona. In many regards, athletes also have to be actors. You got to come out after and do the press conference and be on your best behavior. And I think that that's part of this whole media spectacle now. You want us, ask us after a devastating loss, hey, how are you feeling? Yeah, I don't feel very well. And you know that, but you're asking and baiting me anyways. And I think that, so it's two different things. I mean, the media is one thing and denigrating other players is another, but I think that's a topic we could talk about for weeks.
And you're right. Part of the foundation, if you have a solid foundation, right, that means you have a solid spiritualness about you or moral character, right? And you're going to behave accordingly. But if you have bad intentions and you're faking it, you can't fake it that long. Somebody gonna catch you, right? You might act one way in front of the camera, but off camera, if you're a bad person, eventually it's gonna catch up to you. So you're right, absolutely.
And think about these athletes, and oftentimes, not oftentimes, but I don't want to categorize anybody, but there are instances when you get these, players who are recruited right out of high school. They're skipping college and they're so immature and they're thrown this. And I know that the rules they're trying to revamp and revise those rules. But can you imagine? You haven't had any money your entire life, then all of a sudden you have the world thrown at you, and you're told you're the best in the world. And in many cases they are great, and certainly great athletes. So how conflicting and confusing that is to somebody at such a young age. I mean, really, particularly in the there are studies who say the male brains don't fully develop until about age 25, and I've dated a lot of guys under 25, and I'll vouch for that. I mean, not recently. I'm not saying recently. That's another show. But I think that there's value in that. I can't imagine being a 17 or 18-year-old kid going into the pros. I mean, that's the weight of the world in many respects.
That's why it's and those stories, that example you just talked about, happened in the past. So now when it happens, because there's a history, folks should know how to act, meaning you surround yourself with the right people. In other words, I've seen that movie before. Haven't you seen that movie before?
I've seen it, yes.
So if we've seen that movie before, hopefully the people surrounding that young athlete has seen that movie before and know you got to surround yourself with the right agent, surround yourself with the right people, everything has to, even the league that draft you should have seen that movie before because it happened under their watch. So they should provide resources. Their HR departments should provide resources for those young athletes to protect themselves, not from folks on the outside, but to protect themselves from themselves because they're young. They don't know any better. They can't see the devil coming down the road like I could, or maybe you could. Well, I'm going to say because I'm 56, you're 35. So because we're mature, right? And we've lived, longer than that 17-year-old.
So I want to bring up Brandon's comment. I'm laughing about that.
What did Brandon say?
Next, whatever on Wednesday, Queen Joanne's dating history. So that is funny. And I also want to bring up George's comment. Chris, can you bring that up as well?
What did George say?
George said, and I'll read it. My son, now 10, he's always told him to tell his opponent, good game or nice game, win or lose. I say always be professional, even when he wants to celebrate or cry. And he does such an excellent job that I'm even surprised most of the time. So certainly want to give your son that's certainly a great lesson to learn early on. And yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult for men, women, children. It's really hard to lose for sure. And to win, you want to win without being, especially in those young sports, because the teams you're playing against in Little League are, your classmates, and you don't want to be too boastful in front of them, in my opinion. And then Amy saying that, this is something we might want to talk about. The Little League World Series has started. That's always a pretty fun sport, right? I like to watch Little League. So that's something I'll have to take a look at. I didn't realize.
We'll be definitely talking about that next week. Absolutely. Because if it's on this weekend, I'll be watching. I love that.
So, yeah, I like that too.
I love it.
Here's a sport I'd like to watch. I like, and I haven't seen it lately, but I'm going to have to look for it now that we're on the sports genre. I like to watch the competitive cheerleading competitions too. So I might get you into that, Bo. I'm learning about the NFL. You might have to learn about some competitive cheerleading. I think it's only appropriate.
Listen, you're not intentionally insulting my intelligence. I have, over the years, enjoyed the wild world of sports, which is Disney, and their ESPN cheerleading competition.
All right,
absolutely.
Perfect.
I don't watch it, from 3 or 4 hours worth, but I will definitely put in an hour of that of the weekend to watch that. So yes, I enjoy, because they are competing. They're doing things like this. It's like the Simone Biles, gymnastics. They're doing things. And as a football player, what do we get caught doing that we're not supposed to do? Turn around and look at the cheerleaders. So as a football player, that's ingrained. Watching the cheerleaders. And remember my book. What did I write in my book about the cheerleaders?
I wrote about
the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. My sister will absolutely tell you I was in love with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. So I am in on watching the cheerleaders.
All right, perfect. So there's going to be a special. Brandon's he has a title for it. Bring up Brandon's comment. You see that one, Chris? Bono's cheerleading.
Oh God, here we go.
And Randy's saying, bring up his comment about the highest rated show. Oh, Randy did that as a football player. Well, bring up that other one, Chris, up a little bit. He's saying the highest rated show on the network, up a little bit, would be the dating show, My Dating Show. I think people would be surprised. I am friends on Facebook with a few of my old companions. I had to get them on as special guests.
Well, you are a better person than me, because I am not friends with maybe, if I can think, one. Yeah, just one. I don't look back. No.
All right.
I tend not to look back. But I do have one from college that is a very good friend, that that I'm friends with on Facebook. So yeah.
I'm going to say they keep tabs on me, Bo.
Well, and they should. You're smart, you're beautiful, you're awesome, you're intelligent, you're hey, I call you the superstar.
That's true. I love that nickname. I love it.
They should. So that means if you take that scenario with me, they're not following me, they're not looking for me. Well, let's say in a couple of weeks they may regret that.
Well,
look at me now, right? You know that old cliche, look at me now.
So thank you for all those comments, compliments. That was very sweet, and I appreciate it. And so because Randy's saying someone needs to keep tabs on you, Joe, and he is my accountability partner behind. He keeps me on track on our physical fitness path. So you already have that job, Randy. Thank you. So another topic I want to speak about, and there's two that are very controversial this week. What about the Team USA paintball player? Did you see that? Where she was, and paintball is an Olympic sport, although there is discussions about bringing it on. It's not even recognized by the AOC yet, but there was a news article, a news segment on the local news. A teenage boy had been hospitalized with COVID. He was a football player on his high school team, I believe, and he was a little bit overweight. And they were doing the stats on how COVID is impacting children. And so she put up on TikTok, our newest platform. And I think she said, I'm not going to get the entire quote. She said, your kid does not need a COVID shot. He needs a treadmill. That's what he needs. And then she posted it on TikTok. And so, of course, she was dismissed. She was originally suspended from the team and then dismissed. And I think there's a couple of different things here. One, you're fat shaming and body shaming a teenage kid when you're an adult, teenager. And the other thing is that, the vaccine, first of all, I'm not sure what his age is, and most likely he didn't have the choice whether he was vaccinated or not. He may have been. His parents probably made that decision on his behalf, even if he may not even be 12 yet. So I think that was just a horrible story in many respects. I don't know if you read about it or heard about it or what you think about it.
I did not hear about it. I saw it on TV, but I had my volume on mute because I was sending an important email, and I saw the highlights of the paint gun and the scenes that they do, showing like the competition, the venue of a paint gun competition. So I visually saw it, but I didn't hear it. But what I can say is this: that's just nasty. That's just wrong. That's just mean. What is the point if you don't have the intelligence, the IQ to make a comment that could be a powerful comment or a comment to get someone's attention without denigrating, name calling, right? Like my sister, if she's still on and watching us, we had a teacher in our high school. So by the time I got to high school, the teachers knew who I was because of my sister and my brother, who were 1 year, 2 years older than me, right? And we had a teacher, Mrs. Vaughn, who said, if you don't have the IQ, right, to look in a dictionary and come up with words, right, learn the dictionary, learn the language. You can find other words to use besides the typical 4-letter words or the typical name calling, right? If you can't figure out how to express yourself in a way where it's not being when you're bullying someone or degrading them, then keep your mouth shut. I mean, come on. What did she gain for picking at the kid's weight? What did she gain from that?
Or picking on a kid at all.
Period.
So let's bring up Will's comment, and thanks for joining in, Will. Chris, you have Will's comment there? So I don't know where Chris is, but he's shouting out Mrs. Vaughn. He's supporting your teacher. And Randy's saying the next comment is, which I think is so detrimental. I've been called stupid by teachers, which really is such a disservice. It's such a disservice to, it really changes the blueprint of a child's life. Because school in many instances is a safe haven for children who oftentimes are trying to, that's the only place they can escape. Not oftentimes, but yeah, oftentimes they're trying to escape homes where they're abused, and it's really unfortunate that, you know, the place that should be your sanctuary can be, your whole world can be changed by the comments of one teacher. And I've seen it. You know, I saw it happen to my niece. I remember in 3rd grade, her teacher at a Catholic school told her that she was the stupidest child in the room. And it almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy. From that moment on, you know, she was, you know, she believed that. And
she had no confidence.
True. Yeah, and it wasn't true. And they've done studies on that. I recently read a study about that. And your sister, let's bring up Pamela's comment. Again, we want to shout out Mrs. Vaughn. And, you know, I recently read a study about that, how there was a class that was academically deficient, and they went in and they told the teacher that beforehand, and the class went in and really did poorly. And the very next year, they told the teacher that it was an exemplary class, the same group of students, and they were treated as if they were exemplary students, and they rose to the occasion. So really, it's the whole mindset piece, which, you know, I'm a big mindset geek, and how important that is to one's overall development and well-being. So Mrs. Vaughn, we love you. We should get Mrs. Vaughn on.
Unfortunately, she's passed, but she had a positive effect on all my siblings that went to Ribault High School. My sister.
So she's with us anyway. She's on the show already.
And then my Irish twin sister, she took the, matter of fact, I think I posted pictures of San and Mrs. Vaughn. I posed with Mrs. Vaughn for pictures. I'm sure my PJ has a picture with Mrs. Vaughn. But what I'll say is, coaches are the same as teachers, right? And a coach's job is to build the athlete up with their skill set and their confidence so they can go out and compete, right? But if you continue to beat the athlete down, by the time that athlete gets out on the field, they're going to have no confidence to compete against the competition. So I've seen that movie before, right? So yes, there are unfortunately, some bad coaches out there, unfortunately, bad teachers. There's a few bad apples in every bunch. That's why we should focus on praising the good ones.
You're right.
Because they have a positive effect on the student athletes and the world. And, you know, that's a way we can improve our society, by focusing on the positive people, not the negative people.
Well, speaking of good ones, I have a good apple and a bad apple I want to bring up. Probably my new co-host, I believe, is watching. Can you bring up that comment? So it's going to be the Joe and Joe show. Bo, you're out. I got Joe Sanders is in the house now.
That's my dad.
Your dad. Hi,
That's
Mr.
my
Sanders.
dad.
All right. It's good to see you here. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
But then had no idea he was going to be on either. So thanks, Pops.
So I also want to talk about, remember I sent you a story earlier about, and this is a subject near and dear to my heart, and really infuriated me, is that and this is a coach. He was a coach, and Will saying a great coach will teach us some things that a teacher never can. So I love that comment. But so Emma, and I may pronounce his name wrong. He's an old time player, MLB star Omar, I believe it's Visquel, was accused of sexually assaulting. And it's an accusation, so I don't want to. But there's some pretty strong evidence about it. He was accused of sexually assaulting an autistic bat boy. He he made him come into the shower with him and wash his back, and then he turned around and he was in a state of arousal when he turned around, and then the young kid reported it to two other and I believe it was the Chicago White Sox, a minor league team. They reported it to two other officials there, and eventually they didn't, they gave him a hard time as well, but I believe his parents intervened and they let Omar go, but silently, without comment, which of course is an accusation. You can't, but now he's being accused in a federal lawsuit. And I think that's the flip side. You get coaches who, and certainly most coaches are fabulous, but it's such a disservice when, first of all, again, my son has Asperger's, so it's certainly a sensitive topic for me. And any child should not be subjugated to in vulnerable states to adults who are misappropriating their authority and utilizing it to abuse children.
Same boat as Governor Cuomo, right? Folks who are in a position of power, misusing their power, doesn't understand the responsibility that they have, and they use it as they take advantage of the power that they have. I kind of butchered the way I wanted that to come out, but the bottom line is we've seen that movie before. There are people out there who take advantage when they gain power. They don't know how to handle it, or they use it as an opportunity to prey on people that are less powerful, right? And there are a number of levels that can happen. It could be in the example of Cuomo and Viscal, or it could be based on a kid's playing time, or it could be based on a kid participating in a debate tournament or in a band or whatever, right? So there are some bad people out there, and they deserve the book to be thrown at them or they deserve the process to happen. And when the process happens, let the chips fall where the process ends, because it's pretty bad.
Pretty bad. So we're down to the last 2 minutes. So, I want to remind everybody that there is now a Bo and Joe Facebook group. So come on in and join that. And I'll post the link later on the Coast to Coast Network. We're going to interact with our viewers and fans throughout the week. We're looking forward to that. We're also now on TikTok. We're in this generation, Bo. We're in the social media generation. So we haven't done any dance routines, but we are going to put up some clips of our shows. We have a few out there, and we actually had in just one day, we had over 2,000 views. So I thought that was pretty impressive in 12 hours. And we're going to continue to build our social media presence. So come along for the ride. And we're doing that simply for the fact that we want to show Bo's old girlfriends just what they're missing out on. He said it. Look at me now. So I'm going to give you a minute. You before I give my usual closeout send off to Chris. You take center stage.
Well, I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight. We appreciate it. We truly appreciate it, and it was a good week of sports, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about it. A lot of it crossed in the intersection of politics and diversity, and that's what sports will allow those conversations to happen. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to, and we want to hear folks' opinion, because it's all about learning, right? The more we learn, the better we get. So let's do it. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Take us home, Joe.
So, well, Brandon saying, I want everybody to stay tuned. Brandon wants everybody to stay tuned for date night, whatever, whatever on Wednesday. So that's a different show. You can check me out before the Bo and Joe show on the Whatever on Wednesday show. So that's something to look forward to. Maybe Bo and I will both connect with our old significant others. What's that show? Exes. So Pamela, I want to thank you for tuning in, and Chris bring that up. So we'll let Pamela have the thanks for the Sanders representation tonight. I certainly appreciate it. Great podcast, and thanks for your participation. So speaking of great, we couldn't do the show without our producer Chris behind the scenes. So he's the man behind the curtains. So thanks, Chris. You can play us out. We appreciate it, everybody.
Have a good week, everybody.